Well, we can introduce this program and kick things off. As Christina mentioned, my name is Sawyer Bailey. I'm the Executive Director of AdkAction, a nonprofit here in the Adirondacks, and I'm joined by some amazing colleagues. And together, we are launching a program called the Adirondack Long-Term Rental Catalyst Program, really designed to help motivated short-term rental owners catalyze their first long-term rental arrangement so we can create more available housing in the Adirondacks and hopefully simplify your lives at the same time. I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. Steve?
I'm Steve Underhill with LivingADK, and this program is particularly important to me because in the 3 years we've been up here, we're about to move. Well, my wife is about to move for the 5th time, and for me, it'll be the 3rd time. We all know how tight the rental market is, and anything we can do to help it is great by me. Megan?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Sawyer. I'm Megan Murphy. I'm the Executive Director at Adirondack Roots. Our office is located in Elizabethtown. We also have an office in Plattsburgh, and we work in Essex, Clinton, Hamilton counties. And we are particularly excited about this program. Also, we've seen how difficult it is for folks like Steve to find rentals in our communities. And so we're really hoping that this is just one way that we can increase the number of rentals for our community members. Oh, and so, Sawyer, do you want to switch to the next slide? Okay. So, why are we doing this? So, actually, at a meeting, I was chatting with someone about this idea, and Sawyer happened to overhear that, and she said, we've been thinking about the same idea. The idea that there are actual rental units out there. But we may, how do we entice people to think about moving from a short-term renter to a long-term renter? So Sawyer and I started talking about it, and then we started thinking about it with the Western Adirondacks. And so in that, we started to do a little research. And this is from a study that was done in Essex County, but we believe it probably is pretty similar to most of the Adirondacks. We do know that between the years of 2010 and 2020, the number of rental units in Essex County declined by, or long-term rental units declined by about 12%. And so when you look at the numbers there, that's a little over 500 long-term rental units that we lost in Essex County. And so that's significant. And then from there, we do also know that the rental market tightened as the vacancy rate decreased. That's another way of thinking about the rental market is about the rental units that are occupied. And that's what that's telling us. That in 2010, about 11% of our rental units were unoccupied. And then 10 years later, it's decreased to about 6%. And we are hearing anecdotally that the vacancy rates across the Adirondacks can be even tighter than that in other places. And so we do know that this is something that's been talked about quite a bit through the press and around in economic development circles and other places about the idea that there really is a real need for workforce housing. Losing these rental units for us has just created a situation in which it's difficult for folks that come here to work to find an affordable place to live. And so with that, you see that we have various headlines about, where we are with the crisis and how the potential of the increase of short-term rentals has impacted the long-term rental market. Sawyer, do you want to move to the next slide? So like I said, I had a meeting and we started chatting about this and we got together. And then we thought, well, we know this is an issue across the Adirondacks. So Sawyer and I approached LivingADK out in the Western Adirondacks to say, maybe this is something that we could test out around just find some grant funding, try to put a program together and think about how we could catalyze folks for short-term rental owners to potentially switch their property over to be long-term leases. And just to try it for a year and see how that goes. And so we were very, very fortunate to get some seed funding for this idea. We also talked to some other folks at Adirondack Foundation, and they're working with their partners, the Hudson Headwaters Health Network, And they did fund our ability to try this with a limited number of properties to see how it might go, see if our short-term rental owners might be interested in trying this. Do you want to switch, sir? And so we did, like we talked about, we developed this as an Eastern and Western Adirondack pilot. On the eastern side, we were focused around the town of Elizabethtown, but we realized that not everyone lives just in Elizabethtown, that we have rentals also in neighboring communities like Keene and Westport that are close and might be just as easy to think about using. And then on the western side, we do have the town of Webb and then the town of Inlet together to try to increase the potential number of units that we could look at. And so what are we looking for and why these communities? The reason we thought about these communities is that they have the staple services that folks need, grocery stores, schools, a growing job market, because we do have things like in Essex County, Elizabethtown is the county seat. There are a number of jobs there. We have a hospital here, and there's lots of other organizations and entities, certainly in the town of Webb and Inlet, that need our workforce. So we thought that those would be good communities to start with because of that. We have looked at the data as to what is happening in these communities with short-term rentals. We wanted to focus mainly on those short-term rentals that are in the hamlet. It doesn't mean we won't think about the ones that are outside, but we do recognize that it does make it easier on folks to be close to those services or close to the jobs. So we did look at the data, and so looking at Elizabethtown and Webb, we know that the average annual revenue for short-term rentals in these communities, it's there. People are making a good average, but it's not some of the highest in the Adirondacks. We've looked at some of the other towns, and we do know that. So we're hoping that that makes it a little bit easier for folks to potentially convert over, because they may not make as much with a long-term rental as they do with a short-term rental. So we wanted to be able to think that this would be good to incentivize folks in these communities. And yeah, so we think that these communities represent are a good representation. And then what our hope is that if we can get a number of folks to get engaged in the pilot, our hope is to be able to spread this to other communities after this.
Thanks, Megan. So with that service area in mind, we want to tell you just a little bit more about what this program really offers to those who apply. And really, we're looking to offer a little help to our motivated property owners. We realize that renting a long-term rental property is not for everybody, just like renting a short-term rental is not for everyone. But we also know that short-term rentals are a business, and no business runs itself. And many folks, I'm sure, saw a real influx in their guests and in their revenue, and maybe in their headaches too across the COVID years. And we're also seeing that the number of short-term rentals has really increased, so much so that we're running into more last-minute cancellations. We're running into more competition in the market. But at the same time, we're seeing, as Megan mentioned with the statistics, the availability and vacancy of our long-term rentals continue to shrink, as we know that we need a place for our workforce to live, our educators, our healthcare workers, our service providers that our region so badly needs. So we're really looking to work with landlords who are seeking to make a change towards more of a month-to-month source of income, more of an annual source of income versus the ups and downs that come with operating what is really a vacation rental. We realize this takes time and intention, and it may simplify some folks' lives to take this step forward and move in the long-term rental direction. There are really 3 different tools that we see being able to offer to those motivated landlords: a long-term renter and landlord toolkit, some financial incentive, and some assistance through the unexpected parts of the process. So I'll tell you a little bit about each of those. First and foremost, we're so thrilled that we were able to put together a really comprehensive and custom Adirondack long-term rental guide. If you go on Google and you search landlord resources, New York State, you're going to come up with a whole bunch of stuff that may not really be applicable to our rural area, let alone the Adirondacks specifically. A lot of that is really tailored towards downstate, towards New York City, Yonkers, and they have some special regulation there that doesn't always translate to upstate. At the same time, we realize running a rental up here just looks a little different. So we wanted to create some custom information, gather some resources, and really get the best practices from our existing long-term landlords. We did over a dozen interviews with landlords and tenants all across the Adirondacks and really came away with their lessons learned. What do they wish they knew when they got started, and compiled all of that in a toolkit for you. And regardless of whether or not you work with us as a landlord in this year-long program, we really hope that this toolkit is helpful to you. We learned so much creating it, and we think that this can really be an evergreen resource. So I think that someone will probably be sharing that in the chat for anyone who wants to take a look. Next, again, Megan mentioned our grant funding. We have a little bit of a boost to your budget to help you get started. We're offering our participating landlords up to $2,000 to help make the switch and ease some of the cash flow burden that will come from taking your property off of Airbnb until the day you get your first month's rent and your security deposit. We realize that potential landlords may face some financial burdens to being able to offer the long-term rental. We really advise working with a lawyer, for example, to create a strong lease. There are some opportunities for tenant vetting procedures, some of which can cost money, including background checks. You might offer a furnished short-term rental right now, and perhaps you want to offer an unfurnished long-term rental. This stipend could help you with some furniture storage, or maybe just a bit of light construction or cleaning to the unit that you need to really make it look the way you want to. We're hopeful that this little bit of funding can help you do that and to help you make the switch towards this new situation. And then lastly, we realize that even once you sign a lease with your renter, there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's always unexpected things that pop up, but something that we see is so valuable in working with us in this program and our being able to work with you is that we can be your pit crew on speed dial through the ebbs and flows of your learning process. So if you live in Essex County and you're part of this program, you'll be working with Megan and her team with Adirondack Roots, where you can call them up and say, hey, I've got this thing I'm scratching my head over. Can you help me figure it out? And it's a team really to help you in your journey to becoming a strong landlord, so you don't have to deal with any unexpected challenges alone. That said, we think there's a lot that can be done proactively to make sure this is a really positive foundation for a mutually respectful and successful profitable relationship for you. Likewise, if you're coming from the Old Forge area, Webb or Inlet, you'll be working with Steve and the LivingADK team, and they'll be your folks on speed dial to help you with challenges that arise. AdkAction is here as a resource, but we realize LivingADK and Adirondack Roots are housing experts, and we want to make sure that you can chat with them along the way. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Sawyer. So how we prioritize applicants, once the rush comes and the applications start appearing, we will prioritize the applicants based first on two groups. As Sawyer mentioned before, the first one in the east is Elizabethtown, Keene, Westport, and Lewis, and out here in the west, Inlet and Webb. Ideally, homes should be 3 bedrooms or smaller. We're not interested in the multi-million-dollar estates, and I don't think they're probably interested in this either. Most importantly, the homes must be suitable for year-round occupancy. They have to be winterized, they have to have a full kitchen, and they have to be code compliant. As has been said before, ideally the property should be in the hamlet, but if not directly in the hamlet, close to enough to make it most convenient for the renters we're trying to serve. We prefer to work with landlords who are willing to establish at least 12-month leases, and most importantly, sensitive to best practices for landlords. Next slide, please. The way we'll work with landlords, we'll review all the applications as they come in. We've developed a matrix that covers the areas that we believe are most important. And then we'll reach out to those those landlords that we're most likely, that we're most interested in supporting. From there, if they agree, we'll sign an agreement and go ahead. From there, we'll help you establish a strong rental situation in a variety of ways, especially by planning. Maybe you need to store your furniture, as Sawyer mentioned. We'll help you figure that out. We'll help prepare your advertising and make plans for tenant vetting process. Help you figure out, if you want, what fair rental rates might be, and help with guidance on structuring with a lease. Although really probably ought to have an attorney ultimately look at that. Once you're up and running, we'll assist landlords by providing the stipend that's been mentioned on a quarterly basis. Again, this is a catalyst. It's not expected to go make you say, oh, wow, I've got to do this tomorrow. It's to help people that are really already thinking about this and want to serve their community and make their lives a little easier, and we're here to help. We'll help you with operational questions as they arise. It could be any topic from leasing to maintenance to whatever. And lastly, there will be things that are surprises and unexpected circumstances, and we'll help you through those. Next slide, please. How to apply, painfully easy. Go to the Adirondack Roots website, which is Adirondackroots.org. You'll need to know your short-term rental earnings for both 2022 and 2023. And you can reach out to Adirondack Roots if you have any questions at 518-873-6888. And they can help with any questions you have. Thank you.
We did try to make the application pretty simple, so we don't want to frighten anyone off by the idea of an application. And we're certainly open to any questions. So, you know, this is not, this is something we want you to, if you're filling something out and you have a question, please feel free to reach out to us and ask. Just call, you can email, because we want this to be as easy and simple as possible.
We've purposefully not put a deadline on the application because we realize this is probably a conversation with all the property owners of a given unit to make this decision together. And that may take a little bit of time to come to some certainty. But that said, we're ready to start as soon as you are. But I want to thank everyone for their time tonight. Again, we'll be sharing this recording. If any other questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to our teams. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a good night.